All right, what's up, people? Hey, I'm so glad you guys are here at StuMo Late Night tonight. Hey, like Blake said, last week of the essentials. So, guys, we've been through it all, right? We kicked it off. We started talking about, hey, what are the things that we need in college to thrive in our relationship with God? What are like the basics that, man, if we get these things right, we're going to get everything right in terms of our faith in college. And so we made it simple. We made it short and sweet. And tonight we're ending it with one that I think is really important. So we hit God's Word. We talked about how God's Word is not meant to be a list of rules in your life, but something that calls you to purpose, something that calls you to adventure in your life, to live for good and impact other people. We talked about prayer and how your prayer can change circumstances. It can change you. It can change those around you. Last week, Blake talked about sharing your faith with other people and how God can use you taking risks and steps of faith to share your faith with other people to change their lives. God's doing that all the time. Tonight we're talking about one that's very important, and here's the deal. Those other three standing alone by themselves, man, so important. And even if you looked at the one I'm going to talk about tonight compared to those first three, you might think, man, this one's not as big of a deal as the others. But here's the thing about this one. It's the glue. It's the essential that, man, you need to hold all those other essentials together. And if you don't have this one, at some point in your life, down the road, long term, there's going to be something that takes you away from those other essentials we were talking about. This is the one that holds it all together. It's the one that is so important because it brings everything back together. So I moved to Tucson in 2018, and so we moved about 17 hours across the country down to Tucson. And so we didn't know much about Tucson, but getting here, man, we fell in love with the city of Tucson. We love Tucson. We love everything about it. And so when I think about Tucson, I think about the great things in Tucson. I think about how it's 70 degrees outside, but we got snow-capped mountains, which is incredible. You look around, you're like, man, this is a beautiful place. I think about the food scene in Tucson, how it's amazing. If you guys haven't gotten off campus to like try different restaurants in Tucson, amazing food in Tucson. I mean, you can go anywhere. It's not just Mexican food. It's all different kinds of food. I'm a foodie, so man, I fell in love with that. I love the grit of Tucson. I love how it's different than most cities. So I've fallen in love with the city. But here's the thing about Tucson. If you live in Tucson for any amount of time, you might find yourself having what I call a Tucson close call. That's a pretty standard thing in Tucson. You know, at some point you're going to run into something that's a little bit off, or something that's a little bit dangerous, something that's a little bit more adventurous than you were expecting. In fact, Dane here had his mom in town for the first time, and you know she's flown in from Texas, Dallas, you know, nice highways, nice neighborhoods, everything like that. Dane takes his mom up Campbell towards Banner Hospital, which is right by campus, and unfortunately there's a guy just mooning everyone driving by, like no clothes on, mooning everyone driving by. Man, that's a Tucson close call, right? Like not what we were looking for, something you run across you're not expecting. I'm hoping you guys get to experience these because they're really fun. Now, I remember my first Tucson close call. It was 2018, like I said. We'd just gotten here. We'd lived here for about 2 months, and we're going, man, this place is awesome. We love Tucson. And so one night, my wife and I, we go to bed, and about 4 a.m. in the morning, we hear gunshots outside of our house. Boom, boom, boom. And so I'm not like a huge gun guy, but I know enough to know that it's a gun, right? There's a gun going off in my front yard. That's not good. My wife's like, what was that? And I look at her and I'm like trying to come up with something like, I think it was like construction, you know? Like someone's working on something. Like, hey, let me go check that real quick. So I book it to the front of the house, you know, and I get kind of nervous, you know? I'm like, what am I about to walk into in my front yard? So I pull up the blind and I look out there and there's all these old people in this like cross section of the street by my house, which, you know, that's Tucson. You get a lot of old people. They're walking in the mornings because they can't sleep. And so they're all walking around, but they're all looking down the street. And so I go outside, and they look pretty non-threatening. I'm like looking like, is this grandpa packing like over here? Like, what's going on? And they look pretty non-threatening. So I walk up to them. I'm like, okay, hey, guys, what happened? And they're like, man, it was crazy. I'm just walking down the street. This Camaro starts driving down the street. This guy pulls out a 9mm, shoots 3 bullets into the ground, and then just drives off. I'm sitting there. I'm terrified. I'm like, man, this is it. This is what people talked about in Tucson. And so I start panicking, but what I notice about the older people around me is they're fine, right? They've been living in Tucson for a couple years. They've had their Tucson close calls. They love that part of their life, that they're part of a city like that. And they're like, they just go about their day. I'm like expecting us to talk about it, like call the cops. And the guy's like, okay, see you later. And just starts walking off. So I'm like, well, I guess I got to be with the crowd. And I just walk back in my house. And Rose is like, hey, what happened out there? I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, someone just shot some bullets in front of our house. No big deal. She didn't take it like I did, that first thing. But it was my first drive-by, my first Tucson close call, man. Glad to have it. Close call, but we were okay. And the reason we were okay is because I looked around at the people around me. I was like, oh, well, they can handle this. And if they can handle it, I can handle it too. In fact, this is kind of a common phenomenon in the world. And this actually is something that's studied a lot, especially in like wars and things like that. And so there was this time, especially in World War II, where people studied this. And it's when Germany took over Europe. So like they're going throughout Europe. They're taking over Europe. They're just dominating. So basically there's one country left standing, and it's Great Britain. And the only reason Great Britain's not taken over by Germany is because there's this ocean, there's water that's keeping people from getting over there. And so Germany comes up with this plan. They say, hey, we're going to just bomb London, right? England, all that. That's how we're going to take over Great Britain, is we're just going to bomb them. We're just going to bring our great Air Force over there, drop tons of bombs. They'll just give up. And so the English officials at the time, they started evaluating. They were like, hey, what are we going to do when they start bombing us? Like, our people are going to lose their mind. They're not going to be able to handle us getting bombed all the time. It's going to break morale. How are we going to prepare for that? And they couldn't come up with an answer. But something really interesting happened. They started bombing Great Britain over and over again, destroying cities, wreaking havoc on the country of Great Britain. And as they did, what was really interesting is the people started to show incredible resilience. What would happen is Germany would come across and they would bomb Great Britain, and these people would be like, man, that was a bomb. That was crazy that I almost got hit by a bomb. But then they would get up and they would see other people going on with their lives, and they'd say, oh, if they can do it, I can do it too. And they found this sense of community as they were dealing with these incredibly awful odds, and they started to have this resilience to the point where Germany started going, man, this isn't making any difference. Like, these people should have given up by now, but they haven't. That leads into our essential tonight. The thing we're going to talk about, the glue that holds together all these other essentials. Man, it's something so incredible. And here's the point I want to leave you guys with. A close brush with death or some hard situation where you're alone can be devastating. If you're alone, if you don't have friends, if you don't have relationships in your life, and you go through something hard or some trial in your life, man, it can be a devastating blow for you or those around you. But a brush with death, or going through a hard thing with the people around you, when you have friends and close relationships, man, it can be a catalyst for growth and resilience in your life. It can be the start of something really beautiful in your life. This is what the Bible talks about when it talks about this essential we're talking about tonight, and it's called fellowship. Now, fellowship is a really interesting idea in the Bible, and this is where we get the idea of fellowship from. Verses like this, Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, and this is what it says. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So if I was going to define this essential of fellowship, if I was going to say this is what fellowship is, this is how I would define it, and this is what I want you guys to take away from tonight. This is what fellowship is. It's the act of intentionally putting yourself in encouraging community to pursue loving God and the good works God calls us to. It's the idea of putting yourself around people who are encouraging and who are intentionally pushing you to love God more and to pursue the good works that God is calling you to. It's an amazing thing. I remember the first time I experienced fellowship in my life, like really true fellowship. I didn't grow up in a household where this was like commonplace for me. I didn't really experience it till later on. It was my freshman year of college, and I remember I had a guy who was reaching out to me, and he was helping me grow spiritually, like many of you guys have. People in your life who are pushing you to grow, challenging you, and it was awesome. And then one day, as we were hanging out, he's like, hey, man, let's head to the spot. And I was like, I don't know what the spot is, but I trust this guy. I'm going to follow him. And so he takes me to the library at the university I was at. It's this old library. And we start going up to the third floor, top floor, and we just start heading into like these rows of books, like where you can't really see anything. I'm like, where are we going? What is the spot? And we eventually get to this clearing, and you can kind of see what the library looked like here. This is what it looked like back in the day. It kind of looked like this when I went there too. It wasn't updated at all, but we're weaving through those bookshelves, trying to get through to the spot. And we open up to this clearing, and there's all these people just hanging out at this spot. It's these tables where all these people were hanging out, having conversations. And what I started to realize as I went to the spot with this guy over and over again is, man, these people were doing something called fellowship. They were sitting down, they were having conversations about God and growing in their relationship with God. They were encouraging one another, they were challenging one another, they were pushing each other to their highest potential, highest capacity as people trying to follow God. I'd never experienced something like that before. In fact, growing up in my faith, I thought faith was meant to be an entirely personal thing. Like, it wasn't something you were supposed to share with other people, and they definitely weren't supposed to give you input on your faith. But I started to see this, and man, it was irresistible. I had to have more. And so I started hanging out there, and I started to grow a ton as these people were pushing me to follow God and to pursue the good works, as they were encouraging me to do those things. That's what fellowship is. Man, when people who are trying to follow God in college experience fellowship, they become unbreakable, they become successful in their walk with God, and they become unstoppable in terms of following Him. It's amazing what can happen in someone's life. So when you hear the idea of fellowship, everyone in this room kind of comes from a different spot in terms of how they view fellowship, what they think about it. Some of you guys in this room might be thinking, I've never experienced fellowship before, and I have no idea where to start with that idea. If that's you, man, I'm so glad that you're in this room tonight. We're going to talk about that. Some of you guys in this room might be thinking, well, I've been at things like that before, but I found them like super cliquey or very exclusive, like things you couldn't just jump into. And if that's where you're coming from, I want to explain why. Man, that is not necessarily the case with what fellowship is. It's not supposed to be that way. Some of you guys in this room are feeling unqualified for it. Like, you're thinking to yourself, man, I don't know if fellowship's for me. I don't know if I'm a good enough person to be in a group like Jake's talking about. Like, I've done things that I regret. I'm living a way that maybe isn't the highest. Man, if that's you, fellowship is totally for you. I'm so glad you're in this room tonight hearing about it. Some of you guys in this room have had great fellowship for years. And you're thinking, man, I want to go deeper in fellowship. Man, I want to grow in fellowship with other people and take it to the next level. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. If we want to build the best fellowship, real fellowship that can change our life, we have to focus on becoming the right kind of people. That's where you start. Man, if you want something in life, a lot of times where you start is becoming the right kind of person who can contribute to that. You know, tonight's Valentine's. And so what's really interesting about Valentine's Day is that people are thinking about relationships a ton. Like, the relationships they're in, the ones they're not. They're thinking about the friends they have, the friends they're hoping to have. And if you guys are trying to intentionally pursue fellowship, man, it's going to take those relationships to a different level. I've been intentionally trying to build fellowship in my life for years. It takes time. It takes effort. But the rewards are amazing. What you get out of fellowship is an incredible thing. And tonight we're going to talk about the building block of fellowship and how to become the right person who can do fellowship well. The simple things we can do to be people who contribute and experience fellowship in that way. So we're talking about fellowship, and where do you learn to be someone who's good at that idea, right? It's maybe an idea you've heard of before, maybe something you're not super familiar with. Well, where I want to go is a guy named Solomon in the Bible. Now, this is a really interesting guy from the Bible, and the Bible describes him in a lot of ways, but one of the ways it describes him is one of the wisest people who's ever lived. If you're trying to figure out who Solomon is in terms of like who he would relate to today, he'd be kind of like Andrew Huberman or Jordan Peterson, like the guys that are, you know, wise, that are sharing what they've learned about the world we live in. And why I love Solomon even more than those guys is because Solomon was a guy who took his advice and tried it. I mean, he literally tries everything in life. So he's ultra rich, he has tons of relationships, and he makes it his life's goal that he's going to try everything in life, and then he's going to figure out what actually works in life from that perspective. So as he's giving this advice, he's done it all. He's tried relationships in many different ways. He's tried to build friendships. He's tried to build intentional fellowship, and he is giving us the wisdom that actually works. And what's really interesting is he gives us the basis of fellowship with one simple verse, and this is what he says right here. He talks about friendship. And he says this, Proverbs 26, "Many will say they are loyal friends, but who can find one who is truly reliable?" what he's saying here is that many people are going to say, hey, I'm a great friend. Man, I'm invested in my friendships, but what Solomon's saying is, man, to find someone who is trustworthy like that, a friend who's someone that's that deep, someone you can trust, who's reliable, that is an extremely rare thing, a trustworthy friend. Trust is hard to find. A trustworthy person is tough to find. And I would pose the question to you guys this way, like, who's someone in your life that you would share like the deep, dark stuff with, you know? As you're thinking about your life and thinking about the things that have happened, like we share things with the people around us, but as I'm thinking about the stuff in my life that's the hardest stuff to share, I'm thinking about, man, who would I actually share that kind of stuff with? Man, the list is small, right? It's not everybody in my life, man, and it's because I don't know who I can trust. Man, trust is so important when we're talking about fellowship and when we're talking about friendship and relationships. 31% of people in America think people are trustworthy. That's tough, right? That's less than a third of people in the country think they can trust other people. Man, this is a big problem, but also a huge opportunity for us as we're thinking about building trust and building fellowship in our lives. Here's what happens. This is like they've done actual studies on people who have been surrounded by people who are trustworthy, who have led them, who are trustworthy. This is what they found through studies. People who are surrounded by trustworthy people report being 106% more energetic. They feel 76% more engaged with their job. They experience 74% less stress. They take 13% fewer days off for illness. They report 29% more general satisfaction in life. Trust changes everything. One of my favorite quotes about trust is from this guy named Warren Buffett. And so if you guys don't know who Warren Buffett is, he's an incredible guy, probably one of the best investors that's ever lived, an incredibly successful businessman. And he says this about trust. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. It's true. Man, trust is hard to build, and it's incredibly easy to lose. If you master building trust with other people, man, you guys can have incredible relationships, incredible fellowship in your life. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to get really practical tonight. And I want to teach you guys to be the type of people who can be trustworthy and who know how to build trust with the people around you. Man, it's a skill that you probably won't hear many people talking about. It's something that you guys won't just find people talking about on the street. But man, I want to teach you this because I believe if you guys can become trustworthy people and know how to build trust with other people, man, it's going to separate you in everything in your life. And so we're going to make it really simple tonight and talk about how to build trust and how to build fellowship out of that trust. Trust is kind of like a Venmo account. That's how I like to define it. Man, if you're trying to build trust with other people, what you need to do is you make these things called trust deposits, right? You make deposits in other people's lives so that they can trust you. And people don't really like that idea about trust. People want to walk into a situation and just automatically have trust from other people. But here's the real rub. That's not how it really works. You have to earn trust with other people. And you guys can do that. If you can master these things we're going to talk about tonight, you guys will be the exception and you'll be able to connect and build incredible fellowship in your life. We're going to talk about the 9 ways to make trust deposits, and we're going to fly through them quickly. But man, if you guys can master these things, man, it's going to take your relationships and your fellowship to the complete next level. And so let's dive into these things. 9 ways to make trust deposits in other people's lives. The first way you build trust with other people is this. You be straightforward and honest. You're straightforward and honest. Do you guys have friends in your life that are just those honest people? You know? Like, you know who I'm talking about. It's the ones that like always speak their mind. Like, you can probably envision someone in your mind. Man, there's something about those people that you just trust them because they're just going to tell you what they're thinking, right? I love people like that. But man, when people aren't this way, it's incredibly difficult to trust those people. I remember being in my fraternity my first year, and we were just moving into the house, and there's this guy in our house named Corey. And here's the thing about Corey. Corey was a kleptomaniac. You guys know what a kleptomaniac is, right? They steal stuff, like left and right. And they can't really help it. Like, it's like they just have to do it. You know, we talked about that guy stealing art a couple weeks ago. Corey was kind of like that guy, right? And so, like, I had this, like, prized Masters hat that my dad had got me from going to the Masters. I had this polo that I wore, like, as much as I could. And I remember walking into my room one time, and Corey is actually wearing my clothes. I'm like, Corey, you're wearing my polo and my hat. Give that back. He goes, huh, what? This is mine. And it's like, he had been stealing for, like, a couple weeks. So, like, people were talking about it. I was like, Corey, hey, dude, come on. Like, everyone knows you're doing this. And I was like, Corey, give it back. He's like, nah, man, this is my stuff. And he would not recant from that, right? Not a straightforward and honest guy. We could not trust Corey. He didn't last long in the fraternity. But man, if you want to be, which you guys know why. I mean, you got to get rid of that guy. But man, if you want to be someone who builds trust with other people, you got to be straightforward and honest. Man, you got to be an honest person. Be clear. Encourage people clearly, man. Tell people what you think. And let's discuss this for a second. Man, why is it difficult to be honest with those around us? Go ahead and discuss to the people around you for just a second. With those around us, it can be difficult to be straightforward, but that's actually step number one in building trust with the people around you. Step number two in being a trustworthy person, someone who knows how to build trust with other people, demonstrate respect. Demonstrate respect for people. This is going to be one of the hardest years in American history to do this, right? It's an election year, and people have tons of opinions about what's going on in the world, in our country, all different kinds of things. But here's the deal about trustworthy people. People who are trustworthy are people who demonstrate respect to those they disagree with. They do that, they get excited about doing that with other people. And man, that's a hard thing to do, right? There's so many things that get me in my life, just little personal things. Like, we'll go back to Tucson. Like, man, if you are around Tucson for any amount of time, man, people just walk in the street. You know, like you're driving in the street, someone's just in the middle of the street hanging out. You know, maybe they're dancing, playing some music. I don't know what they're doing, but man, that gets me, right? I don't know why people do that. Or another thing that gets me, the green bubble of death on text messages, right? Hey, if you're an Android person, I respect you, right? I'm glad you're here in this room. But it gets me, right? I'm like, man, yeah, let's not point at those people. You know, we love those people. We love you, whoever you are. I need to learn to be better at showing respect to other people, right? I just do. People who are trustworthy, man, they don't always agree with other people, but they always show respect to other people's ideas. The third way we show trust, the third way we build trust is we're vulnerable and transparent with other people. Be open with other people. Tell them about your life. Like, obviously, that you can take this too far and be the person who's just always talking about yourself. Like, that happens, right? And if that's happening, be point number one, be honest and straightforward with that person. But hey, you got to learn to be vulnerable and transparent if you're going to build trust with other people. When you're doing this, what I would recommend is trying to find the right person you can do this with. Not everyone's good at receiving those kinds of things. It's kind of like fishing, right? You throw out the line, you see what you get back, and you see if it's a good experience. Like, I remember there's a guy, I was like, hey, I want to build fellowship with this guy. I want to build a good relationship. And so I called him up, and I was like, man, I'm going to be vulnerable and transparent. I was like, man, I had a really tough day. Lots of stuff going on. Really short conversation, like it was like 30 seconds. I was like, man, I just need to get this off my chest. And he goes, okay. And you're like, that's not the right person, right? You move on to the next person. Be vulnerable and transparent, but man, make sure the people you're sharing these things with care. I found guys in my life that, man, I go to with those same things. And they're like, man, I hear you. I'm going through those things as well. And they encourage me. Man, be vulnerable and transparent. That's a great way to build trust. The next way you build trust is you right wrongs. You right wrongs in your life. This is really important. And this is why it's hard to do, is I want to challenge you guys to be the people who take the first step to right wrongs in your life. So many times when someone wrongs us, man, we're waiting for them to figure it out. We're trying to show them that they wronged us. Man, be the kind of people who take the first step to right wrongs. There's a pastor out there that I really respect, and this is kind of how he defines if you should take that first step and try to right the wrong. He says, are you 1% wrong in this situation? Just 1%. If you are, you should take the first step, right? And try to right that wrong. I remember going to Kaleo for the first time and kind of being confused. Again, I wasn't really used to fellowship or like these kind of relationships. And I remember being there for the first week, and I remember that first week, like this guy coming up to me and being like, taking me aside, and I was like, what is going on here? And he's like, hey, man, I just got to admit, man, I didn't do you right when I said that. Man, it wasn't encouraging. Like, I should have been building you up. And I apologize for that. And I was like, oh, thanks. Like, I didn't know what to say. And then, like, a couple weeks later, another guy takes me aside. He's like, hey, man, when I did that to you, man, that was wrong. I should have been doing that. And, man, I want to ask for your forgiveness on that. Man, I'm sorry about that. And I was like, wow, I can't believe these people are doing this. And, man, it kept happening to me over and over again. And I started to realize, man, these are the kind of people I want to be around. People who are going to take the first step. Man, people who are going to own when they were wrong. It helped me grow in that so much. The next way you build trust is you show loyalty to the people around you. You show loyalty to those around you. When people share things with you, do you keep them confidential? You know, it's one thing to keep things confidential. It's another thing to go to people and kind of be like, you know, wait till they say something and then be like, oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because so-and-so said this, you know, and then you share it with them. Man, be the person who shows loyalty with other people and let them know that, right? Let them know that what they share with you, man, it's not going anywhere else. Man, treat people's information like you treat your own. Someone starts telling you something, one question I like to ask in terms of like if it's getting to gossip or something like that is, do I need to know this? Like I'll stop people sometimes and be like, hey, thanks for telling me this, but do I need to know like the rest of that? Because I just want to be able to treat people well. I want to be able to show people loyalty. It's a great way to build trust. Another way we build trust is we practice accountability. I love this one. I love having accountability in my life, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. Expect others to hold you accountable. Don't be that person in the friend group that's above the law, that like literally everyone's terrified of, right? Like if you go to that person, bad things are gonna happen, you know? I can be that person sometimes, and I know this, and so like even in my family, I try to be like, hey, guys, I want you to hold me accountable. My kids are like 7, 5, 4, and like 10 months, can't even talk. But I'm like, hey, hold me accountable. And so I would tell my kids this. I remember one day, this is like a couple of months ago, I was getting really frustrated about something. I was getting kind of angry. And my son literally takes me aside and he goes, Dad, you're gonna regret this. I was like, what? How dare you? No, I didn't say that. I was like, you're right. I am gonna regret this. It's accountability, man. And I'm so glad he said that because it stopped me from doing something that I really would have regretted, right? We need accountability in our life from everybody. Man, if you want to be someone who builds trust, practice accountability in your life. The next way we build trust is listen first. There's a verse in the Bible and it says this, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Man, be the person who listens first. There's this idea, and it's called active listening. Have you guys heard of that before? Anyone heard of active listening? Yeah, okay, you guys have heard that before. Man, it's the idea when someone's telling you something, like you're participating in listening to what they're telling you. It's not just listening to the other person, but actually hearing what they're saying. And man, this can be a game changer for you as you're trying to build trust and fellowship with other people. Talk about other people. Man, make them the main focus. There's a phrase that I want all of you guys to master in this room. It's an amazing way to be a great listener. And it's a simple phrase, so you. So what it does when you use this phrase is it keeps the conversation on the other person. So many times when we're in a conversation with other people, they're telling us like, man, just ace that test, right? And in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, well, I gotta talk about something awesome that I did, right? And so I'm waiting to jump in. I'm like, well, yeah, I also aced the test. I crushed that test. So good. And then they're jumping in. They're like, well, yeah, well, I'm ready for the next one, you know? And it just keeps being about us. Man, if you can practice this phrase, so you can change everything. So let's pretend someone comes to you and they're like, man, I did way better on that test than I thought I would. Instead of saying, oh, man, me too. You go, hey, so you must have studied a lot to get that good grade. And they'll be like, yeah, you know, I studied a lot. Man, I was actually pretty worried about it in my life. Oh, so like you're feeling a lot of stress in your life right now. And you just keep going, man. It's a great way to keep the conversation on someone else and hear what's going on in their life. So you. Practice it, man. It'll change your life. The next way we build trust is we keep commitments. We keep commitments in our life. Have you ever thought about what your reputation is in your sphere of influence? Like, what do people think about you? It's tough to think about. You know, it's not something that we go too often. I actually had a guy last week. His name's Aaron. He's a stud. And he set up a time to meet with me last week, and we went and we grabbed some coffee. And he asked me the question, hey man, what's my reputation? He just laid it out there and asked me like to give him input on what people are saying about him. Luckily, I looked at him, I was like, man, you're incredible. Man, you keep your word, you're loyal. Man, you're a hard worker. That's what I think about you. That's what other people think about you in your life. It was great to be able to say those things too, but what a challenging question, right? To ask, man, what is my reputation, man? If you're bold, ask the people around you. And when they tell you something you don't like, listen. Listen. Maybe you'll learn something. I do all the time. Man, keep your commitments, especially like spiritual commitments. Man, I think that's so big in people's lives. Like, you know, if someone's pursuing you to help you grow spiritually or like trying to challenge you to take steps to grow in your faith, man, be the kind of person who shows up for that. Man, that is so rare that someone would do that with you. Be the person that pursues that person, says, hey, when's the next time we can hang out? Man, I want to grow. I want to keep my commitments with you. Man, be someone who keeps those commitments in your life. And the last way we build trust, and maybe the most important way to build trust, is we extend trust to other people. There's a verse in the Bible, one of my favorites, Romans 5:8, and it says this, but God shows his love for us in that while we were sinners, Jesus died for us. And basically what that verse is saying is that, man, while we were at our worst, while we didn't really have much to offer Jesus in terms of what we could bring to the table, he chose to die for us. He chose to extend trust to us and come down to earth and die for us. It's an incredible thing. Man, if you're going to build trust with other people, one thing you got to master is extending trust to the right people. There's this quote from this guy named Ernest Hemingway. He was a great author, and I think it's so true. He says this, the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them, right? It's the only way to find out if you can trust someone, is to extend trust to the people around you. Man, be someone who extends trust to the people around you. Open up your life to them. It's a great way to build trust and fellowship. So that's a lot. And what I want you guys to do, and we'll try to get this out to you guys so you guys can look at them later on. I want you guys just to discuss with the people around you, which one do you need to grow in the most? We all have one we need to grow in. And why is that? Look through this list and discuss with the people around you. You know, as I look at that list, and I think about which one do I need to grow in the most, man, I'm always coming back to this list going, man, I need to grow in a lot of them. Like, it's not something that I've arrived at. This is not something that I've mastered in my life, but it's something I'm constantly trying to pursue in my life, to build trust with other people, man. And in terms of that leading to great fellowship and friendships in life. It's something that I hope you guys will join me in as you guys are growing as well. Man, the essential of fellowship, so important in life. When I think about the Christian life, a lot of times what I'm thinking about in terms of like wrapping up this essential series, I think about like kind of going and getting a boat and trying to go somewhere, right? Okay, you're on the boat, and while you're on the boat, like things are going well, you've got the other essentials down, you got the word, you got prayer, you got sharing your faith with other people, things are going well. But inevitably in life, there will come a time where the boat springs a leak, right? Man, water starts coming into the boat, something hard happens in life, man, something stalls the boat. Man, fellowship is the thing that plugs that gap. Man, when you surround yourself with the right people, man, and you're going through a hard time or you're going through something that's taking you away from those things, man, that is something. The fellowship is something where you have people around you that can keep you going in that thing. We need fellowship. We need good friends. We need to be trustworthy people. It's an essential. Man, fellowship can impact this campus in amazing ways. And I hope you guys will join me in being the kind of people who engage in that and challenge the people around you. Now you guys know how to do that, and I hope you'll really practice that in your lives.